Alright everyone, welcome to a new video. In this video I'm gonna talk about what I think about the educational system in my country, specifically. I don't know about other countries, I can only speak of my country, which is a third world country. You know what I think of the educational system? I'm really against the educational system, man. I'm really someone who doesn't like school, Not that I say that it's useless. I'm not the type of people who say that it's useless, because it's not. I mean, the reason we have, discoveries, the reason we have inventions is all because of knowledge. And school is a source of knowledge, It teaches, people, students, a lot of things. But there is the problems that I find with it. No, we agree that it is useful, really, really useful, It builds the youth, for the future. But the thing that I find, the thing that I find bad about school is that it's basically, it has this test, system, You study a bunch of lessons, you take a bunch of courses, and then you pass tests. The problem is that, tests serve as a way, to evaluate, or we can say, to test your capabilities. Exams serve as a way to test your capabilities, whether you retain the information or not. But they're also they're bad, psychologically. They cause a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and this is what I don't like. I mean, the system of taking exams, bro, is so stressful. A lot of people, there are people who had heart attacks because of that. I mean, I know it's not that common, but it happens, It just goes to show, there are some people, who are shaking before exams. I'm one of them, Shaking from fear, shaking, you are afraid that you may not do well, Even when you have prepared well, you still, you don't know, because for example, you may come across questions you did not for example, you don't know the answer for. There is always a chance. You might forget the answers. You are afraid that you might come across hard questions, or questions that you didn't study. There are a lot of things, So there is always this fear. There's always the anxiety. There are people who don't have this fear before the exam. But I mean, there are also people who have this fear, It's really a problem, because you can't control it. You cannot control it, man. Anyways, so this is one of the reasons why I don't like the system of education, man. Second reason. I mean, when you the system of education is is also I think this is another point that the system of education should improve upon, man. I think that it tries to teach you a lot of things. There are a lot of courses, a lot of things to retain. It's it's trying to to fill your brain with lots of information that are unnecessary, Instead of filling your brain with lots of information that may not be all necessary. Why not just fill your brain with little information that you can actually retain, that are necessary, and you can actually retain? Because nine times out of 10, you're not going to retain. The more information you stuff in your brain, the more you're not going to retain, man. When you focus on something little, it's easier to retain than if you focus on a bunch of things, lots of things, and you'll end up not retaining anything. Because nine times out of 10, people who retain that information only do so for the exam. After the exam, they completely forget about their stuff. I mean, it's like the more information you stuff in your brain, it's like the harder to remember because you have to remember more. So, you know, like, and even if you don't make an effort to remember, like, if you only like you only had little information to retain, you may retain it easily without making that much of an effort. You know? I think it's better to have little information to focus upon, like something specific, instead of of studying too many subjects, too many information, you know, and not retaining anything. Like just focus on one thing that you can retain, you know. So that's another thing, man. I think they're just trying to like so many subjects, too many things to remember. Why not just focus on one thing? Why there is no like specialty? Why not specializing in something like earlier? For example, physics or mathematics, it should be earlier because I mean we have this system, but it's late, you know. High school and in college, it should be earlier. I would argue it should be earlier. I mean, you study a lot of things, man. And all of things that may not be like what you like. They may not like you study a lot of things that you are not interested to learn. You know, that's what I mean. Why focus on one thing that you're interested to learn? Have a specific information about it. Study specific information about it. Little information about it that you can actually remember instead of lots of information that you are not interested in and that you'll end up not remembering. So that's my second point. My third point. My third point will be. That's my third point will be like a lot of the things. Yeah, like. Yeah, my third point would be like, okay, so I wanted to make a point about studying what you love, you know? It's like they're forcing you to learn things that you don't want to learn. So that's like the third point, but I already talked about it kinda in the second point. It's like they're forcing you to learn things you don't want to learn, you know? They're just trying to stuff your brain with lots of things you're not interested in. How are you gonna learn? How are you gonna force yourself to learn something you're not interested in? For me personally, it's impossible. It's like torture, you know. If I don't have the drive to learn something, I'm not learning it. This is why, like, I support the idea of self-learning, you know, independently from school, you know, at home, bro. That's because you are free to learn what you want. You pick the information that you want, not what the information that the elites want you to learn, you know. The people who made this educational system or whatever, man. You choose what you want to learn. It's easier to learn something that you love, you know, because you have a drive for it. You have the ambition to learn it. So this is my third point. It's kind of merged with the second point. The fourth point would be that they don't teach you life skills, like cooking, you know. I mean, survival life skills, they don't teach you none of them, man. I mean, there are schools, yeah, in some countries like Finland and all of these, don't study that much hours, you know, they got this. But, you know, like, they got things like this, you know, like cooking, all of that. But, like, we don't have nothing of that, right? It's like they don't teach you life skills, useful life skills. Investment, you know, cooking, like, they don't teach you that. That's the problem. They only focus on this subject. It's like they don't teach you anything outside of these subjects. There is no like sex education. There is nothing like this. Psychology. We don't study psychology, you know, unless I mean you are specialized later on. You pick a specialty later on, you know. But we don't have things like this, man. So I would argue that's another problem. Poor educational system that only focuses on some things, but ignores other things. What else? What else? Let me think. Yeah. I think we study too much hours. I would argue that we study too much hours. Maybe not as much as countries like China, you know, Hong Kong, bro. Like they study too many. Sorry, no, yeah, sorry. I mean, yeah, I meant to mean North Korea, you know, Japan, yeah, all these like Asian countries. They study a lot of hours. We don't study near as much hours, but I would argue that it's not necessary to study too many hours. It's really about the efficiency, not the time, man. Whether you are actually learning or not, it does not depend on the number of hours. It's about smart work, not hard work. You might argue that you should combine them both, right? But you know, like, I think that, I mean, if you give too much time for learning, bro, you won't have anything. Life is not only about learning, you know. Life is also about enjoyment. You can do activities, you know, play video games, you know, watch movies, you know. It's not only about learning. So you gotta have some time, you know, to do other activities, to spend time with your family. So I would argue that you don't need to study much. It's more about the efficiency, the way you approach studying. The way you approach studying going to make a huge difference on whether you retain the information or not. For example, if you write down information, if you revise the information each day, you know, through repetition. If you give yourself the right environment to learn, it's going to yield way better results than if you study for too much hours without like getting these things, you know, like taking these things into consideration. So I would argue that some time should be left. We study like 8 hours, you know, like primary school study the most, like 8 hours. You know, middle school and high school they study a bit less, you know, and college they don't study that much. So I would argue like for primary school they shouldn't study that much. You should always be some time, man. It's about the efficiency, not the quantity. The quality, not the quantity. So that's what I'm gonna say. For example, in South Korea, like they study like too much, bro. Like from 6 in the morning to, you know, like they finish at 5 or 4 or something like that, and they still go to the library and they still go to cram school, whatever, and they study at home. You know, they don't finish until 2 a.m., you know? They only sleep 4 hours. And sleep is one of the most important things for cognitive function. So how can your brain function well without sleeping? I don't get it. Like it's really too extreme, bro. The system of education is really too extreme in some country. They got this Gaokao in China, you know, this final exam. Everything that you study is preparing you for that exam. We also have a similar exam, you know? Now, if you cheat in that exam, you get like 7 years of prison. Right? So there is a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And this test is about something that is about retaining. Who can retain the most information, you know? It's not about who's intelligent. It's not testing your intelligent abilities. I mean, there could be some tests, you know, but it's mostly about retaining information. You are tested in things that are related to the school program, if that makes sense, you know? And that's what I don't like, man. It's like the system of education, it's like it evaluates your future based on this school program, not your actual intelligence, like your creativity, none of that, man. I mean, there are mathematics, you could argue that mathematics kind of like test your intelligence, physics, yeah, in some areas like logic, you know. But a lot of the things like, for example, history, like geography, you know, like it's more about retaining information, you know. So this is what I really don't support, bro. Like, a test should not determine a person's whole like future, if that makes sense. So anyways, I think that the educational system gotta improve on these points. There is always room for improvement. I'm a strong proponent for self-learning, you know, free learning. You learn what you want. You choose what you want to learn, you know. Nobody's shoving down your throat nothing. But anyways, these are my thoughts about educational system. There are a lot of YouTubers who actually bash on the school, you know, they say that school is useless. I mean, just because you are lucky to be successful, you know, on YouTube, besides millions who put in all the work, you know, that doesn't mean that school is not useful. Just because you're a college dropout and you found like YouTube, you know, as a source of money, you know, like a source of income. I mean, you succeed on YouTube doesn't mean that school is useless, you know? Useless, sorry. You shouldn't really listen to these people because 9 out of 10 you're not gonna be like the same as them. You're not gonna be as lucky as them even if you put in the efforts. Not everybody succeeds on YouTube. We heavily underestimate the role of luck. But it's really important to blow it up, you know? Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed the video, man. I'm just sharing my thoughts, you know? I wonder if y'all agree or disagree with me, man. Anyways, thanks for watching, man. I'm out. Peace.